Households and businesses face a 25 to 30% jump in energy prices from 1 July. Former Prime Minister Paul Keating calls the AUKUS submarine deal the worst Labor Party decision since conscription in World War I. And Tasmanian salmon set to go global. It's Thursday, the 16th of March, 2023. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. You know, one of the regrets I have in life as a journalist is that I wasn't a journalist when Paul Keating was Prime Minister of this country.
Oh, he delivers the best headlines, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's unfair to compare him to Donald Trump because they are like chalk and cheese. But in terms of grabbing a headline or the one-liner, he is the equivalent of Trump. Quite incredible.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to discussing that story a little bit more. We've got an interview coming up after the show, Sean, with Graham Holm, the CEO of mortgage broker Infinity Group.
Yeah, it was a really interesting chat about what's happening in the mortgage market, how people are handling mortgage stress, and there's plenty of it about, and also what to do about it and the importance of competition. But what Graham points out is it's not just about the rate. Sort of buyers beware, particularly if you're coming off a fixed rate loan. What is your lender going to put you onto when you go onto a variable rate loan? Really fascinating chat. Anyone who has a mortgage or is thinking about getting one should listen to the interview.
Yeah, I agree. It's coming up a little bit later on. The main story this morning, though, Sean, the energy crisis came back into the spotlight yesterday with the regulator saying households will face power price rises of between 25 and 30% from July the 1st. That is huge.
Yes, the Australian Energy Regulator released its draft electricity safety net prices for the next financial year, and it's approved big price increases for more than 600,000 customers on default market offers or standing offers in southeast Queensland, New South Wales and South Australia. Households and business power prices will jump by 22% in New South Wales, 20% in Queensland and more in South Australia. Households in Victoria and regional Queensland will be hit harder, with average annual power bills set to jump 31% in Victoria and 29% in areas of Queensland that have regulated prices. Huge increases.
Yeah, that is just staggering, Sean. I don't know how you're going to go explaining this because it can get a little bit complicated, but how does the system actually work and why is this jump just so high?
Well, once a year, the regulator sets a price cap for big retailers like AGL Energy, Origin Energy and Energy Australia. The organisations then take that cap and decide what to charge customers. It's a fairly competitive market, so you don't get big differences between the big retailers. The regulator takes into account global energy prices, among other things. Yesterday, it came out and said the big jump in prices reflects the very high coal and gas prices that resulted from the war in Ukraine, the pandemic, and also outages, particularly in older coal-fired power stations. So put all that together, and the regulator has said, yep, the cost of energy is 25 to 30% higher than what it was. Therefore, the retailers, AGL, Origin, Energy Australia, can pass that through.
The thing I don't get, though, Sean, is the government intervened in this late last year, and it was with much kind of fanfare at the time. And the government said that intervention would keep a lid on energy prices.
And in a sense, it has. It would have been much worse, or at least that's what Energy Minister Chris Bowen said yesterday. They stepped in to put a cap on wholesale prices. Now, Bowen came out yesterday and said the increases will hurt many families, but they would have been higher had the government not taken action late last year to ease wholesale power prices. The price hikes bring into focus the real crisis in Australia's energy market. We just don't have enough capacity coming on board. Snowy Hydro 2.0 is 2 years behind delivering pumped hydro. AGL Energy's Liddell coal-fired power station in New South Wales Hunter Valley is due to close next month. Origin Energy's Araring station is due to close in 2025. This is a major crisis for Australia. Now, there's a great stat in the Financial Review that highlights what we're facing. To reach net zero emissions by 2050 and shut off all coal-fired power, Australia will need to build the equivalent of 50 Snowy Hydro schemes, according to the Energy Security Board. That's 50 Snowy Hydro schemes in about 27 years. Or, think of it another way, 7 times the capacity of the national electricity market that's been built over the past 24 years needs to be built in the next 24 or so years.
That is staggering.
It is staggering. It's a real crisis.
Yeah, it certainly is. And Sean, it's probably worth actually mentioning here as well, our sister podcast, How Do They Afford That?, which is really kind of about making your money work a bit harder for you, but also kind of household budgeting and everything in that space. We actually did a bit of an in-depth look late last year on what to do when those power bills are soaring and just keep on going up and up, and some kind of budget ideas and also some methods that you can actually use to bring those power bills back down. It's probably worth a little bit of a look. The episode, I think, is episode 9. And so if you check out the How Do They Afford That playlist, you should be able to find that one. Sean, local markets, what happened yesterday?
The S&P ASX 200 rebounded somewhat from its big fall on Tuesday, closing up 0.9% to 7,069 points. The tech companies led the way down on Tuesday, and yesterday they led the way back up, with the IT sub-index rising 2.4%. Healthcare stocks were also outperformers, while the consumer discretionary and energy indices lost ground. About 3/4 of the top 200 stocks did well yesterday. Now, the banks were led higher by ANZ, which jumped 1% to $23.26. Commonwealth Bank was a laggard, down again, this time 0.3% to $95.03. CSL rose 1.7% to $283.78. That's a welcome turnaround for the healthcare group, or at least the shareholders of the healthcare group. It's lost nearly 10% of its value since the beginning of February. The energy companies were mixed. The retailers were generally better, and Telstra was up slightly. Now, gaming machine maker Aristocrat Leisure, it fell another 1% yesterday. It's now lost about 9% of its value over the past week. It's a very volatile stock anyway, but 9% in a week, that's a lot of money.
I think you're the only person I know that uses the word laggard.
Laggard?
It's very old school, isn't it?
Very old school. You know my favourite word ever? Inclement. And the reason I love inclement is because it can only refer to the weather.
The weather.
Yeah.
It is a fantastic word, actually.
Yeah, it is. My all-time favourite.
Have you ever managed to work it into Fear and Greed? I don't recall hearing it.
I don't. In fact, I had never thought of it. I love the word. And then one of my great friends from school, Mark, if you're listening, a regular listener to Fear and Greed, this is for you. He said to me once, like years after we'd left school, "You're the only person I know that uses the word inclement." And it kind of brought to my attention that I do use the word inclement. And then I thought about it, and my mother always used the word inclement, and my mother's mother, my grandmother, used it. So it's just a family tradition, and it's my favourite word. And I'd never realised until my mate from school picked me up on it. There you go.
Yeah, most other people just say it's a bit wet.
Yeah, crappy weather out there, isn't it?
Well, that's probably going a bit extreme the other way, Sean. Crappy weather out there today. But yes, we do get your point. International markets, what's been going on?
The big global news overnight, Michael, was the collapse in the share price of Credit Suisse. That's one of the big Swiss banks, with reports that the lender is seeking a Swiss government backstop. Now, Bloomberg's reported that the Swiss government is talking with the lender, trying to assess options, including potentially pushing Credit Suisse into arch rival UBS. The Swiss National Bank has also come out and said it will provide liquidity, but that's sure to hurt bank stocks and, in fact, share markets generally for the next day or two.
Right, that is a big story. Sean, what's happening with oil at the moment?
Brent crude fell about 5% yesterday towards $77 a barrel. It's the lowest level this year, and it follows OPEC forecasts that oil supply could be in modest surplus next quarter, just as the US economy slows. What's that mean for you and I, Michael? Yes, good news. It should mean, no guarantees on Fear and Greed, cheaper petrol and diesel prices.
Sean Loophole Aylmer giving himself a little bit of a, do you say wiggle room or wriggle room?
Oh, I thought it was WR, wriggle room, I would have thought. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to research that one and I'll come back to you tomorrow. Not that I suspect you actually care. Please go on.
No, I do. Gold prices, interesting. They remain high, with an ounce of the precious metal worth around $1,900. Iron ore prices are also high, trading around 8-month peaks. Good news for Australia's big miners. In fact, Fortescue, BHP and Rio Tinto's share price all rose by more than 1% yesterday on the back of that. And coal prices keep falling. They're now trading around $180 a tonne. The Aussie dollar is creeping back towards 67 US cents, while cryptocurrencies have staged something of a comeback, with Bitcoin close to 25,000 US dollars a unit.
All right, there's a bit going on. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, former Prime Minister Paul Keating yesterday gave his views on the AUKUS submarine deal and says that it's the worst decision by a Labor government since World War I.
Yeah, don't hold back, Paul. Now, his main beef is that the submarines being developed are designed to sit off the coast of China. In contrast, as he put it, the Collins-class boats, which he okayed, were designed to defend Australia and repel any invasion. As Keating put it, and I quote, "It's a strange way to be defending Australia, to have your submarines sunk on the Chinese continental shelf." It is a strange way to defend your country. The always outspoken Keating said China has no plans to attack the US or Australia. In fact, he said no one threatens the United States. It has the greatest armaments in history. There's no way they'd ever consider attacking the US. Now, he was talking at a National Press Club address yesterday. He was talking to Laura Tingle, who is one of the great political journalists of her era. Those two used to really make an interesting politician, journalist, when Keating was a politician in the 80s, late 80s and 90s, and they're back at it yesterday. It's great theatre. Well worth tracking down. Actually, you can get it on Ivy on the ABC. Well worth watching.
And Sean, just on the same subject, Canberra has decided to brief Beijing on the deal.
Yeah, so the Albanese government is treading a very fine line on this one, particularly since diplomatic relations have improved in recent months between the two countries. And we're hoping some or all of the $20 billion worth of sanctions imposed 3 years ago will be lifted. China's been scathing of the $368 billion deal for Australia to buy 8 submarines, saying the US, the UK and Australia are going down a path of error and danger. Now, Foreign Minister Penny Wong yesterday morning said that the government wanted to be transparent about the deal and invited other nations in. Chinese officials initially said no, they wouldn't take part in it, but they did yesterday afternoon. Opposition Defence spokesperson Andrew Hastie made an interesting point. He said that China's being a touch hypocritical about all this, given it's undergoing the biggest peacetime military expansion since World War II. Mind you, there are countries in the region outside China that are feeling just a bit uncomfortable. Malaysia's one. Indonesia, it has said that it's watching things very closely. But Fijian Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka, after meeting with Albanese yesterday, said he supported the deal.
Sean, Australia's main financial regulators, APRA and ASIC, alongside Treasury and the Reserve Bank yesterday, released a statement saying Australia's financial system remains strongly capitalised and highly liquid.
Yes, and in English that means all things look okay post Silicon Valley Bank. Now, the Council of Financial Regulators, which includes the 4 agencies, put out a statement, and it basically said APRA, the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority, in consultation with the other 3 agencies, will continue to closely monitor the situation through its intensive supervision of the Australian banking system. What it really is getting to is that it's not too worried about the collapse of the regional bank in the US having any contagious effect locally.
So it's essentially the regulators coming out and repeating what the Treasurer said the previous day.
It's regulators coming out saying we're doing a pretty good job at the moment. Thanks very much.
Oh, that's very positive.
Yeah.
Now, this is an interesting one, Sean. The Sun Cable project is the electricity infrastructure project planning to include the world's largest solar plant in the Northern Territory, the world's largest battery, and the world's longest submarine power cable linking the Northern Territory to Singapore. It went into administration in January, but now there's a bunch of bidders for it, including Mike Cannon-Brookes and Andrew Forrest.
Yes, and Mike Cannon-Brookes, Atlassian fame, Andrew Forrest, Fortescue fame, they were formerly partners in this venture, but they had a really high-profile fallout in early January, and that resulted in the collapse of the company behind Sun Cable. Now the administrators are looking to firm up a short list on who could take this massive project on. It'll include both gentlemen in some form or other, plus others. Now, essentially, Cannon Brook still supports the idea of a 4,200 kilometre undersea high voltage power line, but Forrest is proposing a huge solar farm near Tennant Creek in the heart of the Northern Territory, and potentially that could be used to power green hydrogen energy. He is less keen on the undersea cable, it seems. Be very interesting to see how this goes. When you read reports on it, it doesn't sound that the project will fall over. I think everyone wants it to go ahead. It's just the form it goes ahead is still a bit unclear. It's certainly massive. It's worth about $35 billion.
It's going to set a bunch of records by the sounds of it. World's largest solar plant, world's largest battery, world's longest submarine power cable. There'll be a whole page in the Guinness Book of Records just for sun cable.
World's biggest fight between billionaires, things like that. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Get a bit of scandal into that too. Now, we mentioned this one at the top of the show, Sean. Tasmanian salmon is about to go global after the owner of Tassal, which used to be listed on the ASX, purchased one of the US's biggest distributors.
Yes, a Canadian aquaculture giant Cook bought Tassal 4 months ago for about $1.7 billion. Tassal used to be on the ASX. Now, Cook, the owner, has acquired a group called Slade Gorton, which is a 95-year-old seafood distributor based in Massachusetts. Cook Chief Executive Glenn Cook told The Australian he plans to export Tassal's products into new markets, including Europe, where it recently acquired another seafood distributor, and North America. Cook, the CEO we're talking about, said Tasmania sells and he'll use that marketing advantage. Now, the most recent deal means Cook, the company, is expanding deeper into the US market. Slade Gorton, the company that they took over, supplies hundreds of food service companies and retailers with more than 800 seafood products. And just out of interest, the Slade Gorton company has been in the same family since 1928. There you go. You were laughing at me during that, weren't you?
No, I'm laughing. I've got this image, Sean, of exporting Tasmanian salmon and kind of swimming them to the Northern Hemisphere, like on this epic kind of cattle drive kind of across the US. But instead it's salmon and they're just kind of whipping them along.
Do you know the Chemical Brothers song, The Salmon Dance?
No, I don't, Sean.
Oh, go and look it up. One of the great, great songs of all time. Listeners out there, anyone who is a salmon dance fan, let us know, please. Michael, if you don't, Adam Lang, when he hears this, he'll be jumping for joy that someone knows the Chemical Brothers and the Salmon Dance song, because I'm sure he'll love it.
I'm sure he will. All right, international news, Sean. US inflation eased in February, but remains stubbornly high, and that isn't great for anyone hoping for interest rate cuts.
The US annual headline consumer price index last month fell from 6.4% to 6%, while the core rate went from 5.6% to 5.5%. Now, the headline rate was the lowest reading since September 2021, but core prices for the month jumped 0.5%, which is the most in 5 months. It demonstrates the dilemma for the US Federal Reserve, which has made it very clear it wants to undermine inflationary pressures in the economy. When the Fed meets next month, it's going to have to weigh up stubborn inflation and a strong labour market against the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank and the potential for that to flow on to the rest of financial markets. It's very unclear exactly what the central bank will do.
And data from Beijing shows a mixed recovery for the Chinese economy.
Undoubtedly, China's economy has accelerated since the zero COVID tolerance policy was dropped at the end of last year, but it isn't surging. Retail sales rose 3.5% compared to last year, which is pretty good. But industrial output disappointed, increasing only 2.4%, while the unemployment rate has also picked up a bit.
Sean, a Russian fighter jet struck the propeller of a US surveillance drone over the Black Sea yesterday in what the US says was a brazen violation of international law.
Yes, American forces brought down the unmanned aerial vehicle as a result of the incident, but Russia insisted its warplanes didn't hit the $45 million MQ-9 Reaper drone. Instead, Russian authorities said the drone maneuvered sharply and crashed into the water following an encounter with Russian fighter jets that had been scrambled to intercept it near Crimea. It's the first time that we know about that a US aircraft has been brought down after an encounter with a Russian warplane since the height of the Cold War.
And finally, Sean, a plan to beat internet trolls has gone horribly wrong for one of China's biggest car makers.
Yes, Marketing 101 here. So Great Wall Motor Company, which sells plenty of vehicles in Australia, last week said it would pay cash to people exposing internet trolls. So if a tip-off's accuracy is verified by the company and a law enforcement agency verifies it as well, Great Wall Motors was happy to pay a reward based on the value of the information. Sounds like a good idea, and it was in response to allegedly paid trolls disputing manufacturing information, defects, etc. Now, keep in mind that China's internet is already heavily controlled, and there are legal avenues to get to trolls, more so than in Australia, for example. Anyway, it put it out there. The response from the public was immediate. Basically, a flock of users jumped on and said, your cars are pretty poor. Why not spend the money on making a better vehicle? Not exactly the response they wanted. According to Bloomberg, internet users also claimed hypocrisy, pointing out that many of the positive comments on the company's Weibo, which is China's version of Twitter, were left by the same accounts and sometimes duplicated, something commonly seen with paid-for-sake social media accounts. An excellent home run by Great Wall Motor Company.
Yeah, it's a little bit uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, Sean, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview, and today you're speaking with Graham Holm, the CEO of mortgage broker Infinity Group.
Yes, all about what's happening in the mortgage market, mortgage stress. The thing that I really took home, and maybe it's because I do have a fixed rate loan that's coming onto a floating rate fairly soon, is what I should be looking at when that fixed rate ends, and thinking about, and particularly keeping an eye on where the lender puts my loan into, the rate that it's charged me post the fixed rate loan. Anyone with a mortgage, thinking about getting a mortgage, should listen to this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of goes along neatly as well with the new episode of How Do They Afford That, which came out yesterday, which is all about rent vesting or rent investing, kind of buying where you can afford and renting where you want to live. So you can find that episode of How Do They Afford That wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Thursday, the 16th of March, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.